Hello, everyone, and welcome to FPC Fantasy Live here in the Week 10 edition. My name is Kyle Senra, and joining me is George Carmy. How you doing, George?
I'm doing very well, man. Happy Sunday. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a great day to be watching football. Good to have some great NFL action today, of course, and some CFL action too. Yeah, of course, we're going to talk about some start-sit decisions. So if you have any questions, anyone listening, watching, feel free to message us. If you're listening on audio only, head over to the Full Press Coverage YouTube channel, and you can interact with us there. But yes, here we are, Week 10. And just before we get started, just want to shout out to MyBookie, the double deposit match. And you can get that using the promo code PRESS22. And I mean, if you join today and the deposit match up to $1,000, you could be, with the games that are an hour and a half away, you'd be able to maybe wager on, and potentially win on those. I don't know if I want to pick the Packers.
I totally agree. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. But yes, so fantasy football. And of course, as we get closer to game time, we'll talk about the players that are active or inactive, and just some things for some of the questionable players. I know just briefly, George, one of the things, there are some players playing later that are questionable. I think that the big ones, notably the quarterbacks. And I think both of them are playing in one game. Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford. It might be Colt McCoy and John Wolford. I know you were saying I thought you'd seen confirmation that Stafford was out. He had not cleared concussion protocol in time, but one of the things we were talking about before was I felt Stafford was in a range where you'd probably just play most quarterbacks over him anyway. I have him at QB 25 this week, and obviously if he's not playing, I'll take him out. But there's 24 other quarterbacks I'd rather play. I'd rather play Davis Mills.
I totally agree with you. And a testament to the Full Press Fantasy podcast. A couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation about this, and there was a fork in the road. I was like, should I drop Matthew Stafford or should I keep him on my team? And you gave me a suggestion. You're like, you know what? Like, he's already peaked. We're starting to see some, diminishing returns. We're not seeing that upside we wanted from Matthew Stafford, and I dropped him. And honestly, I haven't.
You got Dak, right?
It's been perfect. I got Dak Prescott instead. It's been fantastic as a result, and now he's out. So I agree. I think Matt Stafford isn't necessarily the most appealing play anyway. So him being out shouldn't really ruffle too many feathers, but definitely have a backup plan just in case.
Kyler Murray, on the other hand, I think I've got him at QB6, QB7. So there's not a whole lot of quarterbacks I'd rather play. So that one could be trickier if you don't have another option. And I noticed, like, in one of my leagues, one of the decisions is I've got Jared Goff could play in place of Kyler Murray, but I also have Colt McCoy. And I'd much rather, I think I'd rather play Goff over McCoy if you're asking me between the two. However, the chance of playing Murray is so much greater than I think the upside of Jared Goff this week that I'd rather take the risk on having to play McCoy if it means I get the chance of playing Kyler Murray.
I agree.
So I think in any leagues where your backup quarterback is playing at 1:00, I'd go and try and pick up Colt McCoy, and I'd rather play that way. And if Murray plays, perfect, he's in. If not, then I still have the option. I suppose, Garoppolo might be available if it's a shallow enough league. He plays at the night game. That might be even a preferred option over Colt McCoy. Heineke potentially.
Yeah, I was going to say Heineke. I didn't want to be a homer at all. I said Heineke is potentially available. I'm sure he's on the waiver wire.
Actually, that might be my favorite option.
14 points a game or something like that. He can probably give you Colt McCoy levels as well. I do look at philosophy though, Kyle. I think that's the way to approach it, right? I think Kyler Murray has that upside potential. He is that. If you have Kyler Murray, you know what he can actually reap as a part of being part of your investment, right? So Jared Goff, he's that mid-level quarterback. You can probably find someone pretty comparable to that on the waiver wire as well. I do like the fact that basically if Kyler Murray doesn't work out, you have the Colt McCoy safety net to kind of throw in last minute. And then, very last, I'm sure there's other kind of people kind of floating around. Taylor Heineke is available as well. So I like that. Go for always in fantasy, always shoot for that high ceiling. There's always that mid floor, but high ceiling would definitely take it to that next level. So I like that as well.
So speaking of Kyler Murray, I know you've got a difficult decision involving Kyler Murray. So if you don't mind, we could head to that right now.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm kind of in that little mixed spot. So I'm playing in one of my group leagues called Fantasy Sundays. I love this league. I've been playing with them for a little while now. Full point PPR. It's an interesting dynamic, right? So I have Kyler Murray and I have Dak Prescott, right? Kyler Murray, he does have that high upside. He does average about 19.4 points per game. He's definitely been carrying my team all year long. My team is 7-2 in that league, so I'm actually pretty confident with that team as well. But he has it. Kyler's had a lingering hamstring issue for a little while now, and From what I've gathered is that Kyler Murray, they're testing him during the ability to open up and run because that's a huge, vital part of his game. The trick is I'm lucky. I have Dak Prescott as that safety net if I want to go that route. Right now, I have Dak Prescott slotted into my starting spot. But Dak Prescott's playing the Packers, and for Kyle can touch on this as well. For all the criticism of the Packers' offense, their defense has actually been pretty solid for most of the year, and they do generate pressure. And Ezekiel Elliott's potentially out with a knee injury, and they might hand it off to Pollard and kind of focus on the run game. So it is a difficult spot for me. So I'm kind of torn. I think I want to I'm potentially leaning towards Dak Prescott to kind of have that safety net, like you mentioned. But at the same time, that Kyler Murray upside is definitely appealing. And I'm playing the number 2 team in my league as well. So I want to win this game. So Kyle, what would you do? I can't hear you, Kyle. I don't know if it's me or. Yeah, Kyle, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
There you go. I was wondering. Sorry about that. Can you say that again? Sorry about
that. Okay, so just we'll talking about the production. So okay, so did you hear my thing about Prescott and his average?
I was trying to get your attention. Sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, so with Prescott, the this 14-point average, I'm pretty sure that includes his week 1, right? Where he scored, what was it, like single-digit points? I think if you calculated his average since his return from injury, it's probably pretty close to Murray's. And then you looked at like floor and ceiling, it's all super close. So like the production-wise, they're essentially the same player. So super understandable why it's a difficult decision for you. Honestly, I think in my rankings, they might be QB 6 and QB 7 or 6 and 8, something like that. So I guess the one question I have for you is this defensive ranking. Is this saying the Packers allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks?
That is what I put down. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, like you were saying earlier, that Packers actually, the defense, pretty tough matchup for, I think, and even at the running back position, I know they allow a lot of yards, but the touchdown upside, they've been really good as a goal line defense. So as you can see in the goal line guide, it favors the passing game much more. 93 is actually the highest goal line grade this week for any team. And so what I also show is the difference. So plus 31.5. So their rushing score is like 62, 61.5, I guess. So, which is kind of like right around just below average, I think. Whereas the passing goal line guide is much higher. So if they get close to the goal line and they're going to score touchdowns, it's probably going to come through the air as opposed to on the ground, especially if Zeke's not there. I don't think Pollard's as good of a goal line back as Zeke is.
As much. I agree with that.
So I think with the Rams, it's funny. Every week there's been one of these so far. A team with the identical goal line grades for their run and pass offense, and that's what it is for the Cardinals. Exactly even 52.75 for both, and it's a bad score for both. So it's kind of saying that there's not one area they're more likely to score touchdowns or not. They might not score any touchdowns. So I think I've got Murray higher in my rankings than Prescott, and now this is making me want to change it. I guess it's interesting that the DVOA,
the whole Cardinals offense, just observing it, anecdotally, is very discombobulated, just never really crisp. I guess the one potential is Kyler Murray does kind of create more on his own with the running game. Prescott can do that as well, but I feel like Kyler Murray does have a little bit more upside. And I feel like when things break down, Murray's more apt to run it in, like from the red zone as well. So I kind of see that perspective there. I don't know. Like for me, I think the safer option would be Dak Prescott. But I don't like. My question to you, Kyle, before we move on, is the appeal I guess I can kind of hear in your voice, but is the appeal, the sexiness of Kyler Murray enough to persuade you to kind of risk that by any chance? Like he might get injured in the first quarter for all we know.
Yeah. I think I would lean Prescott, maybe trusting the goal line grades a little, and
Mhm.
means I'm gonna have to go change my rankings real quick before game time locks.
We just learned something today. It's good. I like it.
Well, and I love doing these because there's a couple times where I've had a player ranked a certain way. Last week I talked about it actually on
Mhm.
on the live stream for anyone who watched last week. Evan Ingram and Mike Gesicki. I had Gesicki higher than Ingram through the week, and then I went and did this, and I had that exact decision for a flex spot in the Scott Fish Bowl, and it came out that Ingram was the better option. So I think he did pretty poorly. I think actually I was right originally, and Gesicki actually did better.
It happens. It
Ingram
happens.
also got hurt though, so I was influenced by that. So maybe a little bit of results of a process there, but ultimately what I did was I went and changed my rankings to reflect what I'm doing in my leagues. Okay, so I clearly made this decision, so I feel Ingram should be higher than Gesicki. I think what I did was I just lowered Gesicki from 8 to 11 or whatever it was to
Mhm.
reflect that. So I might do that and lower Kyler Murray to QB 8 this week, as opposed to I think I have my QB 6. I'll have to go double check that.
Gotcha.
So what was your instinct telling you though?
So my instinct eventually, right now, I think Dak Prescott's the way to go. Like I do like the upside of Kyler Murray. I think the difference is kind of marginal. Like, let's say Kyler Murray will have it like that 2 point, 3 point, 4 point potential higher ceiling. I'd rather kind of suffer that little 4 point deviation as opposed to get nothing at all. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of want to go that route with it. And I think Dak Prescott does have a high floor. And, maybe he gets up for this game and, maybe he does play pretty well against the Packers. But I think ultimately in a nip and tuck opponent, because I maybe that's something that we can talk about today on the show too. Does your opponent matter? And I think I'm playing the number 2 seed in the entire division, so I do want to have more of a safer competition, safer battle, I guess, in regard to our matchup. So I think Dak Prescott's the way to go for me.
And I almost think he has the higher upside. Like he'll
Okay.
be he if either of these players put up a 4 touchdown game, I think it would be Prescott as opposed to Murray.
I agree to that. And then the Rams defense has kind of been up and down, but they do have Aaron Donald. They do have Jalen Ramsey. They do have those upside players. So maybe they do kind of rise to the occasion in this opportunity. So that's good to know. Good to think about.
All right. So yeah, I'll have to go change my rankings after. One of my hardest decisions this week, and it's funny you talked about like the importance of the opponent. To me, this is more the importance of the league. It's a salary cap and contract league.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 of those, and those are the 3 that I really like focus like that. When I first check my lineups every week, I go to Reality Sports Online first, and I go with those leagues first, and I'll go to my other platforms afterwards. So it's always kind of like the first instinct.
Go to I get it.
When I think about trades, I'm always thinking, okay, what are the player contracts in these league for those trades? If I'm trying to on Sunday, kind of, I see this player doing well, I think of trade ideas. Okay, do I have them in one of my contract leagues? Is it a good time to flip, or should I get them in one of the contract leagues and maybe go check what those contracts are? But anyway, so that's kind of why. But I also think it's one of my harder decisions. So did want to have you talk it over. So start one of these players in the flex spot: Chris Moore, Darius Slayton, or DeAndre Carter. And as you can see, I've kind of already decided it's not going to be Chris Moore.
Yeah. I kind of let me throw my 2 cents in there, Kyle, then you can kind of deconstruct it for me, right? So I'm looking at this. For me, it's a slam dunk DeAndre Carter. That's what I see. And I don't know if you feel that way or not, right? I've had DeAndre Carter before on my team. I know the apprehension. I know the frustrations. It's definitely a dice roll to get him out there. But the reason why I'm somewhat confident is the fact that Keenan Allen's not playing today. Mike Williams is also not out today. And I was looking at it, and DeAndre Carter actually, I think he had 6 targets in his past 2 games. So he is getting fed. I don't know if he's putting that, converting that into touchdowns. I don't really have that much stock in him and other fantasy teams as well. And he is playing a good San Francisco defense. So I do see the apprehension there. But I just think that the Chargers offense does have that upside. And I think Herbert does throw the ball around, like 30 attempts a game and things like that. So I do like the upside that he has there. But, obviously you're more invested in it and you might see things more differently than I do. I think Chris Moore is the least appealing out of the group right there, to be honest with you. And I would say it's between Darius Slayton and DeAndre Carter. I don't know. I guess the ceilings are comparable, 16.9, 16.4. The floor is about the same. They're pretty comparable options altogether. I'm trying to look at the defenses. Game totals are about the same, a little bit higher for the Chargers, which would kind of tip it more to Carter as well. And then team total, 23.5. I mean, it's marginal. It's a tough decision. I see where you're coming from. And I guess the one thing that I'm seeing is Houston may have actually the defensive ranks higher for Houston. I'm actually surprised by that. It's interesting. Okay, because I was gonna say San Francisco's defense is pretty strong, but what do you got?
I think it might be that they're so strong against the run. Like even they're
Mm.
like it's funny because they're it's interesting. The DVOA almost says something different. The Texans are allowing fewer fantasy points to wide receiver, but their passing DVOA is higher, which means like they're allowing more production than the 49ers, like 4 times as much basically.
Mm.
So it's weird that dynamic exists.
Yeah, it kind
It
of caught me
seems
off
like
guard a little bit.
does the Texans defense just funnel production to tight ends in the passing game or running
Mm.
backs and not as much to wide receivers? I wonder if that's where that's coming in. But it almost does kind of eliminate the two. Like you could kind of almost take the defenses out of it because they're almost saying two different things. Because I've noticed like the 49ers run DVOA is negative. Like they're pretty far down and like clearly seems like they're a much better run defense than pass defense. And that maybe that's where this number comes in that teams are just not necessarily more efficient throwing, but because they throw so much, the receivers accumulate more points. Against the Texans, teams might also just be running against them so much that they're not
because
they're
they're up against a positive game.
It's not that they're great against receivers. Just teams aren't doing it because they're so bad against the run. Teams can just run through them.
Gotcha. That's true too. And I don't know if you kind of touched on it as well, but maybe teams are getting up early on Houston. They just kind of decide to run against them later on in the game to kind of slow the game down a little bit as well. So maybe that's potentially there.
Which is what the game script is saying, right? Like it's you pointed out, like the 49ers Chargers game has a higher over under, but the Giants are favored. So they actually have the higher implied total than the Chargers do, even though it's a lower game total. So that's almost what the odds makers are saying. The Giants will win this. They'll be up and expected up early. So it's interesting because when I first had this decision, my instinct was telling me Slayton. Liked his role recently with the Giants, and it seems like again the one thing that production wise points to him is the higher floor. And I wasn't he did put up a game where he had 0, but he also played like 2 snaps, so I didn't really consider it. I think I counted it in his average, but not in his floor, so I wouldn't double count that necessarily. But since they've traded Tony and Galladay's been injured, like he's had a pretty stable floor the last few weeks compared to.
Yeah, but I'm actually looking at it right now, Kyle. So basically over the last 4 weeks, according to ESPN scoring, this is full point PPR though, it's 13.9, 2.8, 14.8, 11.6. So that is kind of appealing, right? Having that double digit floor for about three out of the last 4 months. I guess that includes that one game you're saying where he potentially was out, so or left in the middle of the game. So I can see that there.
The other thing too, like you pointed out, you look at the numbers, what the spreadsheet says, it looks like it points to Carter pretty easily. But again, my instinct is saying Slayton, so that's why it's a tough decision because
it is a tough decision.
A lot of these, I went in without really knowing, so I kind of just whatever the numbers say, I'll follow, or okay, what I thought instinctively was confirmed with the numbers. This is the one case where it wasn't, so that's why it's a tricky decision for me.
It is a tricky decision. Kyle's it a full point PPR or half point? What is it?
So it's full point, but there's also points per first down. And there's like big play bonuses and big game bonuses. So 40-yard touchdown plays are an extra, I think, 2 points on top of the touchdown itself and all the yardage you would get. And then if they get 100 yards, I think they get an extra 1.5. So
I think it's starting to kind of it's funny that now that you're talking about this, it's starting to kind of persuade me towards Slayton, to be honest. Like when I looked at it as a slam dunk, I was like, what's going to be Carter? He's going to be the primary option, with Williams and Keenan Allen out. But I just think that all those little amplifiers you were talking about, the first down bonuses and the 40-yard bonuses and things like that, I don't see DeAndre Carter doing that. I think when looking at this, DeAndre Carter was kind of it's almost like a target hound slot wide receiver. He's going to be catching some shorter passes and things like that. And I think he will end up with a stat line of 6 catches, 70 yards, something like that, right? Or just something small in regard to that reflect. But I think Darius Slayton, if you want the upside, if you want that big touchdown, if let's say the Giants start getting on a roll, I think Darius Slayton has a higher upside, I believe. And now we're seeing that over the past couple of games, he does have a kind of a higher floor as well. So it's definitely intriguing. So maybe I'm kind of leaning Slayton. I don't know if that was your gut. Always follow your first intuition. If Slayton was what you thought it was, then go for it then.
And the one thing about Carter that's interesting is he has 1 touchdown this year, and it came in a game that Keenan Allen played. Oh, Keenan Allen's out. Carter should do great, but it's actually the game that Allen got hurt initially. I think it was week 1 that Carter scored his touchdown. So it's been, we expect touchdowns after that, and he hasn't done it. So It's why I am kind of leaning Slayton, but we should.
Historically, DeAndre Carter is not really a touchdown maker anyway. I have experience with him from Washington. He played for Washington for a couple of years, and he's kind of a journeyman.
Yeah.
He's more of like a punt returner, kind of like a PPR kind of guy. But I think Slayton has higher upside. So if you're going for upside, I would go for Slayton. I think with the amplifiers, kind of makes the decision a little bit easier, which is funny because I was going Carter pretty hard before that happened. So that's good to talk it out.
Interesting with Carter last year, it was almost the same case, kind of out of necessity. Everyone else got hurt, or outside of McLaurin, they didn't really have anybody, and then suddenly he was, I think he like doubled his career reception total last season. So, kind of a breakout year for him, and it's led him to this opportunity with the Chargers. So we'll see what happens there. Just checking to see if any viewers have any questions. Nothing.
Yeah, we actually do. We just got one a minute ago.
Oh, we do? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I can pull it up if you like. There you go.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So full point PPR, Kadarius Toney or Jarvis Landry. Not this one's kind of pretty easier for me. I don't know if you feel the same way. I don't even want to start off or want me to start off.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So for me, on first glance, I think Jarvis Landry. I know he's been injured for most of the year, kind of been in and out of the lineup, but I think he is an integral part of the Saints offense. I think he's always been a PPR kind of hound, and I think he's a safe floor. People kind of like Andy Dalton's a veteran, Jarvis Landry's a veteran. I think that's going to be a kind of a next little synergy and kind of parallels where they're going to feed him a lot. So I can definitely see Jarvis Landry having a lot of targets, especially if it's like a full point PPR. That's definitely appealing for Landry. He might not score a touchdown, but I can see 5 to 6 catches for like 50 yards. He's not Landry's got a kind of like a lower floor, but I can see it happening. Tony's been up and down all year. He's very volatile, and coming over to the Kansas City, I don't think he's had a full grasp of the offense yet. I don't trust that yet. And I kind of want to accumulate more data and kind of watch that over time. So that's kind of where I'm at. So if it was up to me, I would go with Landry, but I don't know how you feel, Kyle.
Well, I was feeling the same way of Landry's been out for a while, but if they're bringing him back, they've clearly brought him back slowly. So I'd expect him to be close to 100% healthy. Mm-hmm. There's obviously the risk of re-aggravation, but I'd imagine they're bringing him back because he's got such an important role and they want to use him. So I mean, you always have Kamara there, but I would guess Landry has a good shot to be second on the team in targets this week.
Yeah,
and behind Chris Olave, the rookie. Tony last week got 2 targets.
Further context while you're thinking, Kyle, is like I'm looking at this right now. I'm pulling up Tony. Tony was supposed to be a breakout candidate for the Giants. I'm actually looking at his stats right now. Obviously he was in and out of the lineup as well, but he played in 3 games. 3 games, 2 catches on the year for 23 yards. That's too dangerous for me. He's only averaged 2.3, 2.0, 3.2 for the year. And that's just too volatile. And I don't trust him yet. I want to accumulate more data before I actually go and start him anywhere. So I would go Landry with this, in my opinion.
I look back to last week, his first week with the Chiefs, right? That might be the only week this season that matters because it's what has he done on this team? He had 2 targets. Yeah. Justin Watson had 5 targets. And I mean, he's free agent this year from Tampa Bay that they just signed off the street. No one really made a big priority on Justin Watson, but to me, Tony has virtually no chance of being number 2 on the team in targets because that seems like that's Kelsey and that's Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah,
the one thing that might help Tony is McCole Hardman's out this week.
Yeah,
but I don't know that that's enough to elevate it. So I would also go Jarvis Landry.
I agree. Thanks for the question.
Looking back to it's funny. I had a decision between Landry, Valdez-Scantling, and Alec Pierce to start 2 of them, and I kind of view Valdez-Scantling and Tony as a lot of the same reasons. A lot of the reasons I like Valdez-Scantling are the matchup in the offense, so those would still apply. Mm-hmm. And I'm going with Landry and Valdez-Scantling, but if I had to only start one, I would pick Landry. Like he's the one that scored the best in the spreadsheet.
I agree.
Saints have one of the highest goal line grades this week, 91. I think it's the 4th highest, and a plus 26.5. Like the differential above their run grade is, I think, one of the 5-6 highest. So it seems like if they're going to score touchdowns against the Steelers, it would be through the air, not less likely on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can go. I guess the actives and actives would be out by now. So I'm just going to look that up real quick, just so we can kind of get a scope on who is in and out.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I can kind of touch on some of the teams that I'm looking at too. So basically I'm having a little bit of dynamics issues as well. It's funny. I played a great league, guys. If the listeners out there, you guys should definitely try to get your commissioner to kind of get this going. It's called a guillotine league. It's a fun league. So basically, what you do is week to week, you basically get together and you the lowest scoring team in the league, their team basically dissolves and goes back to the talent pool. And what ends up happening is you have your $320 free agent pot that you have at the beginning of the year, and you basically have to be wise about how you spend your money and how you accumulate talent. So what happens is week to week, and then the team gets eliminated, more talent goes into the pool. And now I'm in my final three. So typically with a guillotine league, because you have a 12-team league, 10-team league, or I'm in a 10-team league. By week 12, it's all said and done. So that's when the season's already over. So I'm in the top three right now, and pretty much I already got top three money. But basically, what happens? Let me pull up on the spreadsheet one more time, if you don't mind. The talent becomes so great, it is hard to differentiate between them right now. So let me go down over here. So this is actually kind of funny. So in any other typical league, it is basically a slam dunk to pick any one of these players and start. But if you look in my flex position, I'm basically determining whether I should do Nick Chubb, Stephon Diggs, or Devontae Adams. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now, which is crazy. Like, George, why on earth would you do that? But my wide receivers are actually Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp, okay? And then my running backs are Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry are my two starting running backs. These are my flex right here. So, it's interesting. My initial intuition would be to go to Stephon Diggs. The only concern that I have is potentially that Josh Allen might not play. That's definitely a concern right there. I know Minnesota's defense is pretty vulnerable in the back end as well. They have a pretty good defensive front, but I don't know about their backside. So I think Stephon Diggs could potentially blow up. Devontae Adams has been a target hound all year long. He did have that on national television a couple weeks ago, that zero catch game, but I don't see that as a huge detractor. And then Nick Chubb has been a stud all year long, but at the same time, it's a full point PPR league. And if I'm going to go for the home run, I want somebody that's going to catch the ball, and Nick Chubb doesn't do that. So, Kyle, looking at these three options, what do you think?
Well, I think it's still Diggs.
Okay.
I think even if Josh Allen's out, I think he should still have a decent game with Keenum, as you mentioned, because of the Vikings defense.
Yeah.
I think we do view Keenum as one of the better backups in the NFL.
I agree.
He's been in the system, so it shouldn't be something where the offense has to change dramatically. And there he has a connection with Diggs. I'd imagine the way Josh Allen peppers
that's
Diggs.
true. I forgot about that. That's a good call, Kyle.
Keenum will probably do the same. He's clearly the best receiver. He's the best player on that team. Maybe you'd say Josh Allen. I mean, you could argue some defensive players too, but certainly offensively, I guess they got some good offensive linemen. But skill position players, weapons to throw to, he's very clearly the best. So I don't see Keenum not peppering him with a ton of targets. And as you mentioned, full PPR. I think sheer volume, like Diggs and Adams should both see tons of targets. But even with Case Keenum, I still think Diggs has better upside, just based on the matchup. And
just listen to
Carr
you, Chubb's automatically gone, right? So Chubb's automatically gone. So between Diggs and Adams, and probably you like the upside of Stephon Diggs more is what I'm hearing.
See, I think I'd probably go Chubb over Adams still, though. So that's maybe how little faith they have in the Raiders' offense. They're missing players now, which I don't think helps Adams because he's already been seeing tons of targets. So if Waller and Renfro both out, that just means defenses can bottle him up more. So I would say Adams to me is the for sure no. But then, I think the answer is still pretty easily Diggs. I think it'd be, if you had to start two, I think it'd be a tougher decision between Chubb and Adams. But I think I'm still going Diggs regardless of who's at quarterback.
Cool. And Kyle, we got a question in the chat. I don't know if you see it.
No, is that it's probably on the Washington page? Like I don't see it here, so cool. You go ahead and post it.
Pull it up. So it's Michael Pittman or Allen Robinson. Hey Joel, is this a full PPR or half PPR? I don't know what the scoring dynamic will definitely play a factor. Kyle,
although they are both similar types of receivers, you're really just going almost banking on the touchdown in either format.
I was going to defer to you.
I don't think Pittman's fallen that far. Especially with Walford at quarterback, I'd still think I'd take Michael Pittman.
That's what I was going to say. I think I'm leaning Michael Pittman as well. I think so as well. So, the Colts are going to be, they're probably going to have negative game script as well. They have Sam Ellinger is going to be throwing the ball around a lot. They're going to force feed him a lot. I don't trust the Rams offense at all. And if I was looking at it correctly, they average about 20 points per game, and more like they're in the 20s in regard to offensive scoring. So I'm not necessarily confident.
It's not like the Colts are that much higher, but
exactly. So I don't really think exactly. I don't think it's that much higher, but I think I would go Pittman. I think
I'd rather face the Raiders defense than the Cardinals defense. I think so.
Yeah. So we both agree to Pittman.
Yeah, I mean, I guess who is the better quarterback? Oh, Walford or Ellinger? I don't even know, right? So you can almost take like as much as like a lot of maybe Pittman's being dropped in rankings because Sam Ellinger, I'd rather have this other quarterback. You might find finally the guy where I might actually rather have Ellinger at quarterback. Walford's not horrible. Walford's okay, but I don't think it's a necessary edge. So yeah, I'd still go Pittman here.
Cool, sounds good.
Because Walford, I think the thinking is the same with Diggs. He's just going to throw a bunch to Cooper Kupp. So.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pittman still to me seems like the best target on the Colts.
I agree. I think Pittman's more of a primary option. The Rams are basically going to be doing Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee as well, maybe throwing out of the backfield a little bit. I think it's going to be more of I don't trust Allen Robinson yet, so I definitely would go Pittman's. And you're welcome, Joel. Thank you for dialing in. I appreciate it, man. No doubt.
Yeah, Joel's always supporting. Always appreciate Joel coming in every week. So we'll start with those inactives and actives. Let's get to the big one. Bills. Josh Allen is active.
Awesome.
He's playing. He's starting. So you start Diggs. Start Allen wherever you have him. Mm-hmm. I kind of blew a 3rd-round pick on Case Keenum this week to get him as the Josh Allen backup. That seems wasted, but whatever. Okay. The trade deadline is this week, so I still have my first. So just get rid of all the late picks. But so Josh Allen's playing. Should have his full complement of weapons as well on offense. So I had him ranked as QB1 this week. I think he's still my QB1, even with the elbow concern. Maybe you could sell me on Mahomes, maybe Jalen Hurts, but I wouldn't drop Allen lower than QB3. So still a must start.
Kyle, to that point, I saw that I was looking at the injury list last night. The Bills are very conservative with their players throughout the week. Like they had one of the longest injury reports of the entire week, where like 7 to 10 to 15 players were like injured and resting, including Stephon Diggs. I just think they were just being very precautious with Josh Allen and just knowing how important he is to the team. I think that's why he wasn't really practicing. So
why waste reps? You know how much he's going to throw the football this year. Why waste any practice reps on that elbow?
Exactly.
So you may not practice very much the rest of the season until he's at least back to close to 100%. So you might be having to see this like limited practice, questionable kind of for the next 2-3 weeks. But it seems like they've decided cautious as you're saying, they decided they're going with him. So Tre'Davious White's out. So that's interesting that he returned and now is out. So kind of talking to your conservative nature. Okay, this player coming back from an ACL tear, they're gonna take it really slowly with him. And just because he came back last week doesn't mean that they don't feel like maybe he suffered a setback or maybe they want to just play it cautious. So if they're letting Allen play, I'd have to imagine they think he's pretty good. And I would say at the risk of re-injury might be there, but the quality of throw, like this isn't going to affect his play. It's going to be a lot of pain to deal with, probably more than anything. And that's kind of on him, his decision, like what he can tolerate. But that was kind of my argument, was even last week after he suffered the injury, he still came out and threw a deep pass, try and win the game at the end of the game scenario. So it seemed like his velocity and his accuracy was still there. So I shouldn't expect a downgrade in performance at all. For the Vikings, I guess no fantasy relevant players really. Some defensive players like Dalvin Tomlinson on the defensive line. It's Bills already have a great offensive line, so anything that hurts the Vikings pass rush you can't really afford to. So they may be able to keep Allen relatively clean as well.
Yeah. I'm actually looking at it as well. So, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be kind of interesting because going into the game, I believe the Vikings average 24 points per game. It's pretty high up there. Like, we're in top 10 in the league. The Bills are obviously up there as well. Looking at the Bills' defense, Jordan Poyer's out. Who else? We said, you just mentioned White was out as well. It's going to be, that's two key people on the back end of their defense. So I think
Greg Rousseau is part of the defensive pass rush. I mean, Kair Elam, I think he was the cornerback that was replacing Tre'Davious White. So suddenly the Bills are down to their 3rd-string cornerback. That's not a great. I mean, I felt Justin Jefferson was going to do well regardless, but it's. I've got Diggs and I spoke with this on the Full Press Fantasy Pod earlier this week. I've got Diggs and Jefferson as wide receiver 1 and 2 this week. I know the consensus wide receiver 1 this week in rankings is Tyreek Hill, but I've gone with I want to stack the two receivers in this matchup. So knowing that Allen's playing, I've got Allen at QB1 still. I Diggs at wide receiver 1 still this week. So I think as much as I don't really play DFS, they'd probably be DFS options. I'd argue maybe Barkley is the best DFS option this week.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so continuing on, Lions and Bears. And this one is interesting for the Lions. Josh Reynolds is out. I think I am going to be playing Khalif Raymond in a league or two just because he's the number 2 wide receiver on the team. DeAndre Swift is active, though, so it looks like they're going with both running backs. I'd
So
argue.
intriguing. It's so intriguing too, Kyle, because if it's funny, like in my one league that I have at NFL.com, I got DeAndre Swift. It was a keeper league, so DeAndre Swift was the best available running back in the first round. So I got DeAndre Swift. And he's been kind of, he started off, boom off to the races, and I was so confident in him at the beginning of the year, but then he's been injured and he's coming back. And, Jamal Williams has kind of been more of the primary back, even with DeAndre Swift there. So I don't know if they're kind of working him back slowly, and I know they probably are. But regardless, it's kind of funny. Swift is more of the explosive running back of the two, but so Williams is more of the red zone, more of like the touchdown vulture of the two as well. So it's definitely interesting.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned Swift started off to the races. That was really just because he was scoring touchdowns. I think even week 1, Jamal Williams had more carries than Swift even before he was hurt. So it seemed like what we like with Swift is not the total number of touches. It's specifically that he's getting so many targets. Yeah. Outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, like the argument earlier with Jarvis Landry, DeAndre Swift might be second on the team in targets. And that's kind of the appeal of it. I'd argue both are startable. I think I've got both in my top 20 this week. So I've even got a league where I have both and I'm going to start both. So
interesting.
I think, it's the Going for Two Writers League. It's a league with, there's no, because it's is it a 20 team league? And so tons of flex spots, some IDP players too. And I took Swift fairly early and then handcuffed with Jamal Williams, but Williams is producing to a point where it just play both, honestly. Yeah. So that's nice to just kind of secure 2 spots right there. So Swift is active, but as mentioned, Josh Reynolds is not. So maybe ups things for Khalif Raymond, maybe just means more targets for Amon-Ra St. Brown. For the Bears, this is interesting because N'Keal Harry seemed like he'd been climbing up the receiver room. Looks like he's out this week. So Darnell Mooney, it seems like Cole Kmet had a breakout game finally last week, and that he just got touchdowns. It wasn't a ton of catches, but those are 2 maybe playable Bears, and then Equanimous St. Brown and I guess Dante Pettis would be the guys to replace Harry. I don't necessarily love playing them, especially against the Lions. You figure Khalil Herbert, David Montgomery, the ways to go on the ground more than anything. So play Mooney, play Fields, play maybe.
How much do you love Justin Fields? Is Justin Fields like a must start in your opinion now, or like is that just kind of out? Okay, for sure.
What is he? QB5 for me this week?
Yeah, it's that kind of nowhere.
Here's the thing, I'd start him over Kyler Murray.
Okay, it makes sense. I mean, he's essentially like a running back now. They're using him as a running all the time, so it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that upside's so appealing. I can definitely see that.
Now I say a great matchup. Oh, the Lions' defense is the worst in the league. Don't tell the Packers that, who's only scored 9 points, but that offense is definitely struggling. So I think that had much more to do with the Packers than it did the Lions, to be honest. Because I mean, the Packers outgained them in yards, like it was just turnovers. Execution, which Fields could be susceptible. He's thrown some red zone and some goal line interceptions this year, but he also, I think he's gone 2 straight games without a turnover. So it seems like he's also figured something out in terms of protecting the football. That'll be the only thing I think that would prevent him from having a monster fantasy day is if drives are ending early because of turnovers. But it seems like he's kind of figured it out. So full in on Justin Fields. I wish I had more of him. Jaguars and Chiefs. So Jaguars, Kendrick Pryor, who I forgot existed, is with the Browns prior, I think, to that. But he's inactive. So I think for the Jaguars, they've got their full complement of weapons. Evan Ingram was questionable this week with a back injury, but he is active. And then, of course, Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, Zay Jones. So Lawrence does have his full complement of weapons, but not necessarily too excited about him.
Yeah.
The Chiefs have almost everyone active, just McCole Hardman's out. So does that mean just more targets for Kelsey and Juju? I mean, they combined for 29 targets last week.
Jesus, wow.
17 for Kelsey, 12 for Juju Smith-Schuster.
I mean,
and to your point earlier about Tony,
exactly right.
It doesn't seem like and that was a game that went to overtime. That was really close. If that's not the case, I mean, they may not. The Chiefs may not throw as much either. So yeah, I don't love Tony this week, even with Hardman out, just because it seems like so concentrated on a couple players. David Njoku was questionable for the Browns. He is still out this week. Still recovering from that high ankle sprain. I was kind of surprised that he was even being talked about as questionable. I figured he was still going to be a couple weeks away. It hadn't been too long since that high ankle sprain. Expecting to at least miss a month. So Njoku's out. Harrison Bryant will be the starting tight end. Demetric Felton is out at running back, which I think means Jerome Ford will be active for the first time this year. He was my most rostered. He is my most rostered running back in Dynasty. Oh, no, actually, it's Deion Jackson. But at one point in this offseason, it was Jerome Ford. And I do have quite a lot of forward, but not that he's going to be playable, but just interesting to see that he might actually finally be active today.
That'll be interesting to see. Keep someone to monitor over there. That's gonna be a fun game to watch too. The Browns and the Dolphins, and we'll see how that goes. The Dolphins have been a pleasant surprise to watch. Their offense has been really exciting to see as well. Like I love the whole Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill dynamic as well, and just the rise of Tua is pretty interesting. So it's fun to watch. Pretty good game.
Those three are, I think, my co-host Brad on the Full Press Fantasy Pod this week. He has Tua as his QB3 for the weekly ranking. So we're like I had him at, I think 5. I think might have had him at 4 actually. So I was pretty up there too. But yeah, those three are just such great options. I like Jeff Wilson this week too. I'm playing him in a couple spots.
I was going to ask you about that. That's a dilemma that I have.
You've got him with Darrell Henderson. I was going to chime in on that. I think I'd go Wilson because it seems like the Rams, A, they're not really efficient at running at all.
I agree.
And B, it's going to be a maybe 3 to 4 way committee split. I mean, maybe Malcolm Brown's inactive later. I know he's questionable, but does Cam Akers get more work? Like it seems like Henderson has more opportunities to lose carries. It seems like it's just Wilson and Mostert. It's just those two. So
split. And in one league, Kyle, I actually have them both. Which one would you like? It's funny. So I have them both in one league, and basically, Mostert actually was the primary option. He's supposed to be the RB1. I think they split it evenly, but from what I gathered was Jeff Wilson was much more efficient. I think Mostert had like whatever. Let's just say 10 carries for 20 some odd 30 yards, but he had a touchdown, while Wilson had like 10 carries for 51 yards, but no touchdown. So which was more appealing of the two, in your opinion?
Well, I remember looking at their workloads, and it was, I think they had like 8 or 9 carries each and 2 or 3 targets each. So it really was a 50-50 split. I guess Henderson, the one thing we could point to is he's probably their best pass catching back. So he would get most of the targets. But again, John Walford led offense. I don't love it. So I would probably stick to Jeff Wilson. And the thinking is, I mean, it was a 50-50 split. His first game after being traded to them, is there a chance that Wilson, if he's immediately come in and taken this role away from Mostert, that he really, they paid big money to Chase Edmonds, and then through the year we'll give Edmonds 2 carries a game, and Mostert was really carrying the full load. Suddenly they trade for Wilson. It's immediately a 50-50 split. Tells me they really like Wilson. So I'd play Wilson over Henderson. I'd play Wilson over Mostert, I think.
Okay. Done. I agree with you. I think I'm going to go that route.
Because to me, if it's going to be one of them emerges to be a 60-40 or like a 70-30 split, it's probably Wilson, not Mostert. If they really wanted to play Mostert that way, they'd probably continue and bring on Wilson slowly. So,
and remind me as well, they were together in San Francisco, right? Wasn't Wilson and Mostert there parallel, so they know how to work off each other? Okay, perfect.
It's funny. Mostert's big breakout year was a year where Wilson, I believe, broke his arm. So, and I remember before that point, like Mostert's breakout really happened at the end of the season after Wilson had gotten hurt. I think Matt Breida was on that team as well. He had gotten hurt. So it was before Wilson got injured. It really did seem like the 49ers were approaching that as very much a 50-50. If anything, Wilson might have been the preferred pass catching guy, because I think Mostert had 2 targets, but I don't think he caught either of them, whereas Wilson caught all 3 passes. So
I saw that, yeah.
More efficient as well in the running game, or in the passing game as well as the running game. So yeah, I ranked Wilson higher than, I think I have Wilson at RB20 this week. So he's in the very much probably should start him range.
So Wilson's going to be over Henderson and over Mostert in your opinion? Gotcha.
Sure.
Cool. Done.
Surprise. I mentioned the Dolphins surprise because I think their third running back is Salvin Ahmed, and I think he's mostly just used on special teams because Myles Gaskin's inactive. Teddy Bridgewater is also inactive this week, so Skylar Thompson, I'd imagine, would be the backup. Not that matters too much, but just as a just interesting reference. I don't know if it's injury or if it's play related. I'd imagine it's injury.
I'm not sure.
Moving on. So Texans and Giants. Nothing really. Sorry. Actually, this is interesting. Brevin Jordan is inactive for the Texans. That's a messy tight end room that I don't really want any part of. No. Jordan Akins, OJ Howard, and then Quintario, I think his name is, who caught the touchdown last week. It was the opening drive touchdown for the Texans on Thursday night. I can't remember, but that was his only reception all game. So I would have thought Jordan Akins was maybe the guy, but I don't know. I mean, they traded for OJ Howard, and he started week 1 with 2 touchdowns on 2 catches. It's like it's weird. One of them is probably going to do well, but knowing who it's going to be makes it that you could just take a 0 easily. So even Brevin Jordan being out doesn't really change it. It goes from it's 3 guys instead of 4 guys. So
I'm sure there's probably other options of the waiver wire as well. I kind of stay away from the position. in my opinion.
Yeah, no. Harrison Bryant for the Browns. I'd
Mhm.
much rather play him knowing that Njoku's out and he's going
I
to
agree.
be the primary tight end.
I
For the
agree.
Giants, David Sills is out. Daniel Bellinger at tight end is also still out. So thinking of the Giants receivers, I guess that means, is Kenny Golladay on injured reserve?
He's looking at questionable. It says limited
Okay,
participation
so
in practice questionable is what
he's
I'm
not on the
seeing.
inactive list. So Kenny Golladay is playing.
Yeah.
I don't really think that changes much on my Slayton decision, though. I think it would still be Slayton and Wandale as the primary two
I
receivers.
agree.
And
They're
while
fading Galladay in New York. I agree.
yeah, even before his injury, he was barely playing snaps. So
Exactly.
I'd still view Slayton as the starter there, as the guy I want to start. So for the Saints, this is interesting. Mark Ingram's inactive, and Marquez Callaway at wide receiver is also inactive. And I think with Callaway, the fact that Landry was coming back was kind of
I agree.
made it so no one was probably going to play Callaway anyway. But Ingram being out is interesting. Maybe that means more carries for Kamara. I mentioned earlier the goal line grade definitely favors the passing game. Kamara could also catch touchdown passes, but yeah, I think like
I
as
don't know
mentioned earlier,
who's the back. I guess who's the third running back for the Saints? I can't even think on top of my head.
is it Dwayne Washington?
I have no idea.
I'll
I
have
really
to look
don't
it
know.
up.
So maybe okay, interesting.
I think
Yes,
I believe Dwayne Washington's on that team.
Okay.
Yeah, Dwayne Washington. Oh, Jordan Howard.
Okay. Well, I guess potentially Jordan Howard would get some PT. I don't even know if he's dressing today.
I
But
think
it's gonna be the
seems
Jarvis
like he's
Landry
active. Yeah,
show. And
with Ingram, he's not on the inactive list. So yeah, all three running backs are active. Kamara, Washington, Howard active, and Ingram's out.
gotcha.
Yeah, and even though they have Washington on the depth chart ahead of Howard. That's probably because he's been on the team since training camp and like he's been there, whereas Howard was just a recent pickup. But there's a chance Howard just is the number 2 guy and he gets
100%.
I don't think there's great rushing touchdown upside. So yeah, don't go and play Jordan Howard, anyone.
No, not at all.
But to your point, George, maybe that's something to pay attention to and potentially pick up Howard in
that's something that kind of raises the eyebrow a little bit.
Or even if you have a free spot today, maybe that's a pickup now and a stash in case something happens to Kamara and Howard gets a bigger role.
That's true. Along. Deeper leagues.
For the Steelers, Mason Rudolph's inactive. Minkah Fitzpatrick's inactive.
Saw that.
So Fitzpatrick too, I think that helps Jarvis Landry in that safety kind of over the middle would maybe help cover the slot receiver. So
I agree.
No Fitzpatrick
the Steelers definitely down. Their defensive backfield has been pretty weak all year long. They got William Jackson in a trade. He's on IR he's out for a couple games now. Minkah Fitzpatrick's down. Also, and Kello Witherspoon is also out as well. So their defensive back end is starting to become very weak and very thin. So I definitely think the Saints have opportunity for upside. Like I said before, like with Mark Ingram out, and it is going to be the Landry Kamara show today. I think they're going to get a lot of receptions. I don't know how much productions and touchdowns they're going to actually get, but they're going to be force fed a lot. So I definitely would invest in them if I have them on my team.
Yeah, for sure. Going to be starting Landry where I have him. For the Broncos, KJ Hamler at wide receivers out. Also, Marlon Mack at running back. It seems like Mack might have had a chance to be the third player until they traded for Chase Edmonds. So Edmonds will be active in his first game at the Broncos. Not really sure what that utilization is going to be like. I actually have a league where, as the second running back, deciding between Latavius Murray and Chase Edmonds. And I don't love either because the Titans is a tough matchup. I still think Latavius Murray...
I have Latavius Murray, and I'm very reluctant to start him. I started him one time. He gave me a low score, like single digits, less than 5, I believe. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to kind of keep an eye on him and not put him in unless I absolutely have to. So that's kind of where I'm at with him.
I was really upset that Deion Jackson was inactive because I would have rather played Deion Jackson over either of the Broncos. But I'm leaning between the two, between Murray and Edmonds in that particularly. I'm leaning Murray just because, they traded for him mid-season too, and it seems like they kind of immediately made him the starter. Or not even the starter, but like giving him more work, and he was more efficient than Gordon. So I'd imagine Murray's still the best running back to have here. So I would play him for now, but this week I think is going to determine everything because if
it's a good data collection week, I agree.
If Chase Edmonds comes out and catches a bunch of targets and he's very clearly the pass catching back of the team, that's probably what differentiates and is the running back you do want because then you're just hoping on a touchdown between the other two.
Pretty stout pass catcher. I can definitely see that for sure.
Andrew Beck at tight end is inactive. So I'm trying to think, is Albert Okwuegbunam active? I guess it doesn't matter because Greg Dulcich is the guy at tight end, even as a rookie. So he's definitely a really strong start. I think I had him at tight end 6 this week. So For the Titans, it's mostly defensive players that are out for them.
Yeah, Jeffrey Simmons is out.
Yeah, Jeffrey Simmons, Bud Dupree, Amani Hooker. That's a starter at all three levels.
And Zach Cunningham. Yeah, there's a lot of every level there's someone out. So it's definitely something interesting. But at the same time, the Broncos' offense has been inept and pretty weak all year long. So it's definitely interesting. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know how much that changes things. I'm not super excited about Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy this week.
I just started in one league too.
That's what I was gonna say. Like you may not have a choice. Bye weeks and just investment on them. I think the only league where I have Sutton in, it's not a guillotine league, but it's one where I've accumulated a ton of players to the point where I can easily bench Cortland Sutton because I'm not going to bench him for Stephon Diggs or Jalen Waddle or any of the great running backs I have. So or even Tyler Lockett, right? Like it's a pretty stacked team.
Disappointment. I got him early too, like second or third round. It kind of hurts, man, but it's all good. Yeah.
It was taking the bet, right? If Wilson came out and was amazing, one of them was probably going to benefit between Sutton and Jeudy. It's funny because I was touting them in my rankings, but I just didn't. People were so high on them that I just didn't get any of them because they were going too they Sutton probably went in the second or late second, early third.
Yeah, they probably got him early third round, I think, and it definitely it looked good at the beginning of the year. Russell Wilson was forced. I thought he was going to be the DK Metcalf equivalent in Denver, and it didn't actually equate to what happened. So stuff
for sure. So I guess I don't see any other questions, and that was all the teams. Because then I guess I'm trying to think, are there any other questionable players for later that we don't know of? Because I think Debo is back to practice and he was off the injury report going full, so I don't think Debo is questionable. Like he's playing for sure, I believe. Mm-hmm. So that's one where you're going to put him in your lineup. You don't have to necessarily worry. Trying to think Monday night. Are there any questionable players in that game? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so really either.
It's more about questionable performances.
I actually I got one more question I could throw out there if you're interested. So sure. I have a quarterback dilemma. So this one league is it's just splintering and falling apart. So I had Javonte Williams for the Broncos. He's out for the year. I'm starting Cortland Sutton's killing me. I have Joe Burrow, but I have to put him on the bench. So I basically have the option to put either one of these quarterbacks in. Daniel Jones or Derek Carr? Which one would you feel more comfortable starting this week? I know this is awful. Or I can go Heineke on the waiver wire, but that's kind of where I'm at. Daniel Jones and Derek Carr is what I'm looking at right now.
I think I have Heineke the highest in my rankings, honestly. Heineke's at 11 for me. Daniel Jones at 13. Carr at 17. So I think, and you know this fan, and you get older, you've gone and seen so many games. I just don't see how Washington gets much run success against the Eagles. I'd imagine they're going to be down early, and it's going to be a ton of volume for Heineke, as opposed to the Giants, who we expect to be up early against the Texans, and it's not so high volume for Jones. That would be the only reason I'd lean Heineke over Jones. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm really not excited about Carr at all. So I would say not Carr. that's the answer. Do not start that Carr. Park that Carr. Keep it in the garage.
The one thing with the Commanders, obviously I have a vested interest in them. They struggle to generate offense. That's just what they struggle with. Their running game, I think there's 3 yards of carry. Brian Robinson, they're kind of sending him into the offensive line. Antonio Gibson, I like him as a potential player, but they have to utilize him more. Heineke, he's so volatile. I guess in a negative game, he can start throwing the ball around a lot. I guess I got to look at my point scoring as well. He will turn the ball over between a fumble or a sack, but he just has he hasn't been playing that well. He has more of 150, 200-yard games in that realm, maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns. I kind of see the upside with Daniel Jones because he does scramble a little bit. I do think the Houston defense is a little bit weaker than the Eagles defense as well, so I'm kind of leaning that direction. And I can just see Daniel Jones kind of taking the cheap points by basically throwing it to Saquon Barkley on the screens and utilizing him in the pass game there. So it's funny that you're so low on Derek Carr, but I mean, that's where he's at this year, right? He's that low. So I think it might be Daniel Jones for me.
Yeah. That whole, I've got Jared Goff 2 spots ahead of Derek Carr. That's how saying how, but that's the production tier that Goff's been in. Whereas I think Jones, he might also be in that production tier, but you said if the scrambling, the rushing floor kind of makes me put him. That's why I put him at 13. But like I said, 2 spots between Heineke and Jones. So I'd say go with either of them. I would lean Heineke because I think Washington's going to struggle so much to run that they're going to have to pass, and he may not be efficient, but from sheer volume, he may outscore Daniel Jones.
No, that's true.
So,
that's true.
Yeah,
I don't feel good about any of them, but we'll see how it plays out.
I think that the idea with Heineke that I don't mind is that you just drop Derek Carr to pick him up, right? You don't have to necessarily invest another spot. Whereas if it was, okay, pick up Heineke, but you had to drop Daniel Jones, who was already on your team, I'd probably just stick to what you had there. And Jones is the backup because he may have more long-term upside later in the season if you needed him. Whereas
That's
Heineke,
true.
it really does seem like, okay, this is a matchup specific, and it's not even a great defensive matchup. It's just game script matchup more than anything. But he has produced well. He's done well fantasy points wise, and that's why he's in that top 12 tier to me of production, because that's where he's been producing in his 3 or 4 starts now. So
Yep.
been pretty consistent, really solid floor. I guess Daniel Jones had a couple games. There was the ankle injury game, certain games where he wasn't running, so that floor was not as high. It seems like, especially coming off the bye week, he should be fine. So that floor might be back to what we'd expect from him. So I would say between those two, it's we mentioned earlier, right? Go with your gut. We talked about that with the Slayton DeAndre Carter decision that I'm faced with, and
that's interesting. So Derek Carr is cuttable for you?
I think so. So this is this one quarterback, right?
It's one quarterback. I have Joe Burrow anyway. So Joe Burrow's been my primary quarterback all year long. So basically, I'm assuming
that my point is going to be
he's my free agent options pretty much.
I think all 3 of these guys are cuttable next week when you're just going to play Burrow the rest of the season, honestly.
100%,
and then if these starters are out there and you could just pick up a Taylor Heineke randomly, I'd say don't even worry about rostering
either one of these guys,
3, but 2 quarterbacks. You could just maximize, running backs, backup running backs who suddenly, if an injury happens mid-game, they get a spike in value. You already have them. You don't have to go through waiver wire. So, I for sure say Carr is cuttable in 1 QB.
Cool. Sounds good. Good to know.
And that may help some people who, still, probably drafted Carr in some super flex leagues. He was going in the 2nd round.
I have him in a super flex league as well.
So I'd imagine in single quarterback leagues,
it's tough sledding over there.
Well, yeah, I'd imagine with Carr, he's probably going in 9th round redraft leagues, maybe even 8th round with Devontae Adams, the boost, and
exactly. I was really excited about him.
I don't think he's ever been more expensive than he was this year, and he's putting up a fairly disappointing season.
What's that?
He's putting up a fairly disappointing season, especially towards last year. Like, it would have been the return on investment last year is like miles ahead on Derek Carr than it is this year, because he was cheaper 100%. Last year and he produced better. Now he's more expensive and he's producing worse. So it's double.
100%. You nailed that.
You there with the price.
I agree with that.
But yeah, I guess we'll double back and just cover what we do. I know I'm with the Full Press Coverage Packers, as you can see from the Packers logo. I do love the Packers, after all, even as spite of how bad they're doing. But Full Press Packers podcast, also the Full Press Fantasy podcast. Do that weekly on the Fantasy Pod with my co-host Brad Harvin. On the Packers Pod with my co-host Jesse Hall. We try to do 2 a week with the reactions. This week we didn't get to be able to do a reaction episode on the Lions game. We're probably just too depressed to, so we had the 1 episode this week. But actually, and I know next week is interesting because the Packers on Thursday night. So what we'll probably do is just do 1 episode next week as well. No, I guess we would do a second recap episode like on the Friday. So that'll be a strange week where we do the preview and the recap of the same game the same week, and that's the joy of Thursday night. So a little bit of a weird schedule next week on Full Press Packers podcast, but look for that. Should drop Monday night, the next episode.
Cool.
And then go ahead, George.
Yeah, so I love being on here. So I'm George Carmi. I'm the managing editor of Full Press Commanders. I host my own podcast as well, Full Press Commanders podcast. I got a preview show on Monday for the Monday Night Football game. We're going live at 5 p.m. I have my friend Adam Aniba and Wale from 1340 Fox 5 is going to be on kind of previewing and talking about the game. They're awesome, great content creators. I'm also a co-host of Full Press Fantasy podcast here, occasionally whenever I don't have that my season ticket holders of the Commanders game. But I love being on here with Kyle, very knowledgeable. So thank you for having me on, Kyle. I appreciate it. I also write for fullpresscoverages.com. So definitely check us out. A lot of great content creators put in some great work. So definitely check us out there.
Yeah, George is at GCarmy21. I'm at Senra Says. And George, I will leave you with this. I just checked my rankings really quick. I already have Prescott ahead of Murray. He's at QB6. Murray's at QB7. So go with that.
Start up with confidence. I love it. Sounds good.
Didn't have to change anything. There you go, folks. And I guess Washington's playing 1 o'clock next week, or
I think they have a bye next week. So I think I'm good for you next week as well.
All right. So I guess we'll both be back next week here on FPC Fantasy Live. Thank you all for watching, listening. On behalf of George, again, I'm Kyle Senra. See you for now. Best of luck today and enjoy the football.
Bye, guys.